Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good today. Thanks for asking. And we want to thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we will talk about a very important principle in the understanding of the spiritual science of Kriya Yoga. In this show, we will be unboxing this statement from Mary Baker Eddy. We hear a lot about spiritualizing the body through thought. This teaching regards body as physical or material and undertakes to change matter into spirit through mental effort. Divine science, from the basis of omnipresence, teaches that since there is but one substance, and that substance is spirit, there is no material body. The body is spirit now. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance, get the light in your soul, and transcend the material limits. So, Swami, I was thinking before we got started on that, what we could do is we talk to our listeners about the new moon that's going to happen today. Can you give us some insights on that?
Yeah, today's the new moon, new beginning. It's also Columbus Day, something to reflect on. And this particular new moon, this new beginning, is going to be accompanied with the moon trine Saturn, trine Mars, and conjunct the sun, which is a good time to use your collective purpose and personal desire to form self-expression. I think with regard to the topic of this particular show that we're about to do, the spiritualization of matter has a lot to do with self-expression.
I like to think about, since today is the holiday, Columbus Day, maybe this show can give us some insights on some of our own personal discoveries.
Yeah, and maybe we can even look at the discovery that Mary Baker Eddy made, which is more impersonal, but is a very valuable spiritual understanding that she came upon.
So the title of our Blog Talk Radio show today is called Clarification on Spiritualization of Matter. So that's kind of a mouthful there. I was wondering if maybe you could give our listeners a little bit of information. What does that really mean?
Yeah, I think there's an old saying that they use in Maine that says you can't get there from here. And I think it's a comical phrase that is used in the Northeast. And it seems to fit the paradox of the belief that matter can be spiritualized. And it's a very interesting thing because the misconception or the false belief that we can start with the physical and it will lead to the spiritual, which is being practiced and taught, especially I think in the yoga community, and accepted in the religious communities and some of the scientific theories, that this whole thing of the spiritualization of matter, it doesn't really play out like that at all. In true reality, all is spirit. Spirit is the only reality. And anything that reports in the senses, anything that you can see, hear, feel, taste, touch, or smell, is not real. That spirit is the only reality. And that's an important thing, I think, as you start to try and understand yourself spiritually. When we are trying to understand ourselves spiritually and we are looking with a five-sense mind. With regard to this whole process in us becoming spiritual, that it really isn't a matter of changing the external picture so much as it is making these changes in consciousness and assuming a different identity in your own personal consciousness. We talked about this in another show where we talked about the spiritualization of thought, which is, I think, a lot closer to the truth than the idea of spiritualization of matter.
Well, in the summary, there's a note that Mary Baker Eddy says, and that is to change matter into spirit through mental effort. And that is something that I think, as you've been discussing of late, is really impossible to do, I think.
Yeah, and it's also something that I think most of us are trying to do. It is, I think, a misconception that we are forming our reality with our thoughts, that with positive thinking that we are creating a positive reality, and with negative thinking we are creating a negative reality, where in fact divine law is the only creative principle. The perfection of being, the creation of the universe was by the Creator, and it is perfect. Now, it is our responsibility to lift our consciousness to meet that understanding. Because if we are born in a physical body, we are really in a reality that is apart from spirit. We are in a divided consciousness. And we have talked about this a number of times when we explain the principle of manifestation. That the concept of God is everywhere and in everything, but no one sees it. And the reason being that God is whole. God rests in a state of perfect divine unity. That in order for something to manifest, it had to split from the unified state. It manifests in half and then leaves behind a complementary, unmanifested other part. And in the framework of this principle, we start to see that if we find ourselves in a reality that is verifiable through the senses, it is because it's in half. Our acceptance of that fragmented consciousness starts to outpicture a reality that is not under divine law, which falls under what is referred to as the law of karma, which is the law of opposites. But it is a belief in two powers, and it is an ever-ending, ongoing struggle. And it creates this conflict between spirit and matter. And for a lot of us, we identify with the manifested part, and that becomes our reality. But in truth, it is the invisible and the intangible that is the true reality. And I think another atrocity here is that there is life in the physical body, or that the body supports life, with the mentality that if you fix the body, that you can save the life, which seems to be the basis for the Western medical model, which makes matter cause, thus completely undermining the revelation of divine law and missing the whole mark of spirit being the only cause of true reality. And that was what was commonly referred to as the sin, which misses the mark, or avidya, ignorance, where we're mistaking the impermanent, which is the physical body, for the permanent, which is the spiritual body.
So my next question to you is, if Kriya Yoga is a spiritual science, and we really cannot mentally force our way through attaining different levels of consciousness, there actually is a process and a procedure.
Yeah, there is definitely a way of doing it, and human will is really not it. But the acceptance of divine will is really the way to do it. And in Kriya Yoga, I really think that they nail it when they talk about brahmacharya, which is carrier of Brahman. Also, to mention other spiritual sciences, I think one of the major things that are overlooked is Christian Science or divine science, which was brought about by Mary Baker Eddy. Yeah, in Christian Science, they talk about doing things mentally. And of course, there's a big difference between what they call mortal mind, carnal mind, or your five sense mind, and divine mind. And the same is in Kriya Yoga, where we make a distinction between the lower mind, which is the part that's directly related to the five senses, and the higher mind, which is the seat of wisdom. And so sometimes when you're working with these terms, like we have been saying all along, how we think is what we become. But in order for us to realize our true identity as spiritual, we really have to change how we're thinking. And in the framework of doing that, we will start to change the external picture that we are manifesting.
Am I right in assuming that what we have to do is we need to come to the realization that there really is no material body? We have to come to the realization that our substance is that we are spirit.
Right. That's 100% right. And that's a tough pill for us to swallow, to say that this physical body isn't real. And one of the things that I've recently kind of started to discover is that we equate life with sensation and animation, whereas the changing conditions of the personal mentality is what's moving. And what we're not taking into consideration is the changeless state of being, which is really the operation of spirit. And to start to learn to think with divine mind as opposed to the five sense mind starts to reveal the truth of being. And like you said, the body is really a belief. And it's a belief in something other than God. And so as a result of that, it falls under material law. It falls under of the law of karma. And it is, again, it is supported by the belief in two powers and not the one. And the only way that we can really achieve this level of understanding is to really be able to think with divine mind. And I really like what Mary Baker Eddy says when she says we must think with God as God. And when divine mind moves into its rightful position as an avenue of awareness in your consciousness, then of course you become a transparency for divine law. And that will start to reveal the perfection of being.
Well, I think this is a good place to pause to hear a word from our sponsors. So listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 1, Human Development and the 8 Essential Stages of Kriya Yoga. This program is a comprehensive course that will help you get your arms around the science of Kriya Yoga. It provides a clear understanding of the goals and objectives behind yoga, along with the physics of spirituality. It includes the practices, supportive concepts of Kriya Yoga, and the process in human development, apotheosis, the process of the human becoming divine. A complete guide on how to become a human in the adult state. Get the light in your soul and experience the simplicity and joy of union with the divine. This course is available in live classes at the ashram or online with 8 videos or 4 CDs. Visit our website, www.ipdtransform.com, for more information. welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, I'm hoping that you can expand upon the idea that the body isn't real.
Yeah, that's a tough one to really kind of digest, I think. And like we were saying before the break, that we equate sensation and animation with life. And of course, that complies with the changing conditions of the personal mentality. And our true reality is spirit. And spirit is the changeless state of being. And it's the void, it's the nothing out of which everything comes. So basically, what we think life is oftentimes is erroneous. And that's the whole thing of avidya, ignorance in Kriya Yoga. We're mistaking the impermanent for the permanent. So what we think life isn't really life because it's not permanent. It's not eternal. The physical body as we know it, the appearance of the physical body, is not eternal because it expires, it changes. And so it complies with the five sense lower mind, but not with divine mind. And a big part of the practice here is to raise consciousness out of the limitations of five sense mentality and start to identify with our spiritual sense of selfhood, which is identifying with the part of ourselves that is whole and complete, as opposed to fragmented and separate from wholeness.
Swami, in our notes today, we have a phrase in here: to access the truth of being, one must get completely out of matter and lower mind and into spirit or divine mind. Well, that sounds great, but for those of us who may not understand that, what does that mean? But how do we actually go about doing that?
Yeah, the framework that we work with in Kriya Yoga is Ida, Pingala, Shushumna. And that would be marked by the path of descending prana and ascending prana. And descending prana pulls us into physical reality, and ascending prana pulls us into our five sense mind. And what we find is that if we continue to circulate through Ida and Pingala, that there is no access to Shushumna, which is referred to as the middle road in Revelations. And so we have to transcend the information that we're getting from matter and mind, and then we have to raise consciousness up through Shushumna, the middle road. And what is that going to look like when I'm actually doing it? Because it's a lot of instruction. Yeah, the only analogy that I can really come upon is that if you've ever shot a rifle, you notice that there are two sights on the rifle. There's a back sight and there's a front sight. And that means that matter and mind, Ida and Pingala, are needed in order for us to hit the target here. And so the information that we get from the body and the mind are going to give us the clues to let us know whether we are in sync or in harmony with divine law or the law of karma. And so when you are using your five sense mind, you can use your mind to analyze your physical body. And any discord that you may find, anything that does not comply with what is referred to as the characteristics of spirit, which would be perfect health, perfect alignment, perfect harmony, and it would spill out into your reality, which means that your whole life would be in balance. It would be complete, peaceful, harmonious, whole. And if things are not lining up in that respect, then what we have to understand is that we have a belief in something other than the one, other than spirit or divine law, that we have a belief in two opposing forces, that we have a belief in good and evil, God and man. And so in the framework of boiling down all of this, we have to try and get ourselves to this identification that is, first of all, completely impersonalized, because I can't have a me and you. That on a spirit level, everything is one. And the I of my being is the I of your being. But where is the I of my being and the I of your being one and the same? Because it's not going to be found in the five sense mind. And so the big part of this is starting to move out of the testimony of our senses and start to move into our spiritual faculty, the higher mind. And the higher mind works on a completely different format. The lower mind works on duality and contrast, and the higher mind reads only wholeness, the absolute. So the lower mind is rational, but the higher mind is absolute. And so it starts to outpicture a completely different external image, and the image would have the reflection of the perfection of being, as opposed to a reality that is seen to be in conflict and also to have lack, and is also moving towards or looking for to improve itself. Whereas divine law is perfect, and it is eternal, and it is eternal now.
Yeah, I like what we say in our notes, and that is Ida and Pingala are the pulse of the world of sensation. Spirit has no pulse, frequency, nor sensation, and when spirit is accepted as yourself, your body becomes the temple of the living God. Your mind becomes the Christ mind. And doesn't that sound like a great place to be?
That's exactly what we're trying to move towards.
Well, I have a question for you. We say that in our notes here, I'm going by what you have written down, and it's God is the health of our countenance, yet we look for health in our countenance and not God. No longer love, hate, or fear anything external, no concern for the outer picture. And again, that sounds really great, but how do we go about no longer loving, hating, or fearing anything external? That sounds like a tall order.
Yeah, and the term in yoga is called detachment. And the way to really demonstrate detachment is that you really need an attachment to a reality that is unchanging, that doesn't report in your five senses. And when you are attached to spirit, the absolute, and there is no stimulation in your five sense mind, then of course you're able to live out from the truth of being and not be disturbed by the changing conditions of the personal mentality.
Well, I don't know if I do the right thing, but if I catch myself having a judgment on something either good or bad, or this person's that way, that this person's that way, I check myself and say, whoops, that was just a judgment right there. Be careful. And then I think sooner or later, if we keep catching ourselves, eventually we start training ourselves not to have these thoughts or judgments. Do you think that's a good plan for us to do?
Oh, absolutely. And trying to move out from, being critical and also accepting the testimony of the five senses, because if we are seeing lack, limitation, sin, suffering, disease, those are all things that we believe and are holding in our consciousness. And it is these beliefs that are keeping us from identifying with the perfection of being.
So it seems like that's what we do, is that we rely on these appearances, and we have concerns for these things external. You know, we have charities, we're concerned for the environment, so we're concerned for the outer world, and I realize now that we need to put our concerns elsewhere.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, we're always trying to fix everything from the outside, from the effect. And one of the reasons why we don't have such a good success rate with it is because spirit is the cause. And we're trying to fix it from the effect, which is the outer appearance. And on a very deep level, if you really start to understand how it's going to work or outpicture the way you want, the first thing is you must understand the role of this concept of spirit, the absolute, the concept of God in reality, because if you don't have that as a foundation, then the whole thing's going to unravel and fall apart. To understand that there must be a central principle of life, there must be a rule of life, a law of life that will hold the whole thing together. And if that rule or that law is everywhere and in everything, and it's absolute goodness, and when we look around and we're seeing sin, sickness, suffering, we're seeing accidents and we're seeing injuries, what's wrong with the picture? Because it is not divine law appearing. And that's what we've started to talk about, this thing about two sides, that matter and mind must be in harmony with divine law. And if it's not, then we have a belief in something other than this principle of life.
I have a quote here from Herb Fitch that I'd like to put out there, and that is, "You are spirit, and the life of spirit is eternal and in every tomorrow already. The life of spirit isn't going to become something, it is whole in everything now. The life of spirit isn't going to be born in a tomorrow that isn't here now. The life of spirit extends into all tomorrows now. And what you call tomorrow is merely your sense of that which spirit already is." I think that's a really great quote.
Yeah, I agree. I like that a lot.
Well, it is about that time. We do have to start ending our program for this morning. So listeners, be sure to visit our website. It's www.ipdtransform.com. And again, once you're there, there's all kinds of tools for you to continue your learning experiences. And be sure to tune in to our Facebook Live episodes that we do every Wednesday at 5 o'clock. So Swami, do you have any other final thoughts about today's program?
Yeah, well, I would like to have people take advantage of this new moon, and possibly, I think the message here is not to be justified by the law of karma, the belief in two powers, but to justify yourself by the Spirit. Faith in what is not measurable, but invisible and intangible. And this is the one true God that they write about. Human beings think that we can add spirituality to our humanhood and thereby attain God's grace. And it just doesn't work that way. That the physics of spirituality is like attracts like, and two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. For us to come to God, we must come to God empty. and to fill ourselves, to fill our consciousness with the presence of what is invisible and intangible. And with that, I wish everybody a good day. Namaste.
And thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.